Mr. Cullen for 3 minutes, then Mr. Kent for 30 seconds.
I'll take you back to an email you sent as Integrity Commissioner on February 2nd to Mr. Waters, who is one of the top officials in the government at the Privy Council. And I'm quoting an email that you sent to him. There is one issue that your office is currently not privy to and that the clerk must be briefed on. A former senior official at the office has retained legal counsel in order to pursue a claim for constructive dismissal. I will be pleased to provide details to a PCO officer to ensure that Wayne, that's Mr. Waters, is not blindsided. Do you regret that email at all?
I don't recall. I frankly do not remember. I'm not saying I did not write the email, but I don't recall that the subject matter was.
The email came out through documents. It's in the Globe and Mail.
What year was it?
This is soon after you took office. This is after Madame Ouimet left. The Liberal commissioner, the Liberal chair of the committee was quite scathing about this interaction with a senior official. It was a heads up. It was an email from you to him saying, "I'll prepare to brief you," so that to a PCO officer to assure that Wayne is not blindsided.
I have no recollection. I'm sorry.
You have no recollection of that
whatsoever.
Okay.
No, I must have written hundreds of thousands of emails.
Well, I understand, but I guess do you see my concern? That as an integrity commissioner, if you're giving somebody who might be falling under investigation a heads up so that they're not blindsided, would fall completely outside of your purview to do.
The wording of the email that you just read would indicate that Mr. Waters was not the subject. It was somebody else in the system who was the subject.
To make sure that Mr. Waters, that Wayne is not blindsided.
But it was not about Wayne. It was about somebody else that reports to Wayne.
Oh, so you're tipping off Wayne to make sure that he knew that somebody in his staff was about to maybe fall under.
To give the clerk a chance to organize and respond, essentially.
Right. So,
but I don't recall who it was or what it was.
Madam Fraser pointed out, as the Auditor General, that there were 228 cases that were not properly investigated. Of those, how many did you decide to investigate in the end?
Okay, Mr. Cullen, I'll be pleased to provide the answer to the committee, but I frankly do not remember how many we investigated.
Ballpark? Like more than 100? Less than 50?
I said I think as part of my introductory remarks that during my term at PSIC, I oversaw 100 investigations. Some of them were pre-Ouimet, and some of them arose after I was appointed.
So you said earlier in testimony that people don't wake up with an intent to break the law. You're trusting. What's intent?
I used to work in the correctional service, so there may be some exceptions.
But my question is, what's intent got to do with it? I might not intend to speed, but if I speed, I'm breaking the law. The Prime Minister might not have intended to get on a private helicopter, but he did.
No, all I was saying is that education is important because people want to do well. And if they do realize what the expectations are, it's less likely that they will inadvertently break the law. Inadvertently break the law. Try to avoid that.
I'm going to quote from the AG report again on your office. The Public Sector Integrity Commissioner decided not to investigate the complainant's reprisal and decided to close it on 2nd of April 2013. As a result of internal delays, lack of management oversight, and related failures, the complainant had to wait over 18 months and concluded with, in the complainant's statements, that trust was lost in the relation to the PCISC's process. Do you agree with that finding from the Auditor General, that trust was lost?
Yes, it was indeed. The complainant had lost trust.
You understand? Like, one of the concerns, I understand your difficult position in not wanting to fully commit to continuing the investigations, which I would, you read the papers too, into the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister of Canada. Like, you don't get higher than that. That in your previous role, there were challenges in continuing certain investigations. That we have this process that you applied in the middle of August, you had a 1-hour interview in November, the committee gets 7 minutes to hire you for a 7-year position. I guess what it's hard for me to determine, because it's not possible in this interaction, is that are you tough, are you fair, but are you a dog with a bone? Would you describe yourself as somebody who pursues it to the end to make sure that it happens? Because that's the confidence that we need.
We're at time, Mr. Cullen, but I'll let Mr. Dion answer.
Very brief final answer. I tabled 10 reports while I was at Public Sector Integrity. Some of them were very tough, and I did not give up, and we went to court in some instances to retain the ability to go forward with the investigation and the tabling of the report, and I'd be pleased to say more. Some of these reports were hard fought, and I believe in abiding with the law is very important, and the resources should be used on those cases where it really matters. That's essentially what I was saying earlier as well. So, but you know, in the two cases that the Auditor General investigated were not, I can assure you, in the global scheme of things, very important matters to start with, unlike the matters that you have been talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen.
Point of order. One of the principles in our House is the independence of the committees to operate fully and perform our functions. One of the functions this committee has is to review certain selections for certain officers of Parliament. This being one of them, we also had lobbying as well. I'm looking through the timeline and the sequence of events with the process, which I think I've made myself fully clear, my level of dissatisfaction that after 3 extensions, 18 months of extension for the previous officer, in this case of ethics, that we had a 1-hour interview and apparently 1-hour interview. I'll get to the point of order here that the government introduced. We had to call these emergency meetings to facilitate this process as the session is winding up before the holidays. The government introduced a motion to vote on the reference of Mr. Dion in this case, almost simultaneous to whether this committee was even going to meet and have this brief 1-hour time with him. We now have, under Mr. Erskine Smith's, the required, I'm sure his authorship is all over this and his own insights into the wording. And
I guess I would like you to get to your point of order.
My point of order is this, that the committee's ability to do our work that we've been asked and tasked to from the House of Commons is infringed by the government's House Leader, who introduced a motion to have a vote on Mr. Dion prior to even the committee being assured that we would have this meeting in the first place. We invited Ms. Chagger to appear. Liberals, with one notable abstention, disagreed with that to explain how we got to this process in this state. And I would argue that it puts not only a cloud over this committee, but not to no fault of the applicants, the nominees, a cloud over the officers of Parliament who are working, as Mr. Dion rightly said, behalf of Parliament. It's very frustrating to allow this vote now, as I assume what Mr. Erskine Smith will now move, a vote on the motion to proceed to the House, when it was the House Leader's choice to, what I would argue, is subvert the effort of the committee to have a proper hearing. If we'd not been able to meet today, Chair, the House would have a vote tomorrow afternoon on Mr. Dion. Is that true? So through you to the House.
Mr. Cullen.
What's that?
I would still want you to get to your point of order. It's still debate up to this point, so I still haven't heard a valid point of order other than you've made some points, but point of order is, I don't believe, one of them.
Well, noted through this, and again, I said this to our previous candidate, to participate and validate this process in any direction for us is non-tenable, as it was for Mr. Erskine Smith over the request of the House Leader to appear before us. So, as I said to Mr. Dion off record before this meeting started, I say to him now on record, nothing personal, but it's very frustrating and I think regrettable that we're at this stage as the committee charged with this to do this important work, to hire somebody for 7 years to hold us all to account.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. We'll go on to the motion.
Thanks very much, Chair. So the fact is we did meet, and having heard the answers from Mr. Dion, I move that the committee report the following to the House, that we've considered the certificate of nomination of Mario Dion, nominee for the position of Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, referred on Monday, December 11th, 2017, pursuant to Standing Order 111.1 sub 1, and that we and that he be confirmed by the House of Commons as Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner.